You're watching Better Business Bureau's Business at its Best, brought to you by Ataraxis. You've got employees, we've got solutions. Human resources, insurance, benefits, and payroll. Our business is your business. BBB's Business at its Best.
You are only as good as your word. Dale Dixon here with Better Business Bureau. Welcome to Business at its Best. Each week, we are right here showing you why ethics and integrity in business is so important. While we profile those companies in Idaho doing it right, our focus today is honoring promises. And when someone at the front counter or on the phone says a business will deliver, you expect follow-through. On today's show, being able to honor promises means starting with clarity, setting the ground rules, and we start inside with setting expectations for employees. We show you some new ways to think about the profitability of having a reputation for honoring promises, and wrap up with a financial planner in Idaho Falls who is working hard to be sure his customers know he follows through. You know, we are talking about honoring promises right now on Twitter. Ask your question, put that hashtag BBB Trust, in Twitter. Business at its Best airs across Idaho each weekend from Boise to Twin Falls and Idaho Falls, thanks to our media partners, KTVB, Idaho's very own 24/7 in Twin Falls and Boise, and local News 8's Now channel in Idaho Falls. We're going to spend some time with the home health care industry, hospice specifically. Clark Lim owns Treasure Valley Hospice, and Honey Goodman is Business Development Director. And we both thank you both for being with us today. And
thank you.
Tell us a little bit about Treasure Valley, Clark.
Well, Treasure Valley, this year we'll reach our 5-year mark. And I just got to say, I appreciate having the opportunity to be on the show today with this particular topic, honoring promises. Hospice is such a wonderful industry. Families, individuals, when they're facing that end-of-life situation, are generally, facing that for the very first time, and they are wanting to hear promises from a hospice company and from caregivers in any arena, and honoring those promises is really critical.
And that's exactly why we thought about bringing you folks on to talk through this, because we thought about the dynamics when you talk about the customers. So when you hear that phrase, honor promises, what does it mean to Treasure Valley Hospice? I'll turn to you, Honey.
Well, what really that means to us is that there is no such thing as a casual comment. Anything that comes out of the mouths of our employees is the same thing as a promise. So we've worked really hard on just empowering our employees to know that we're going to back them up when they say something. So if they say something, we're going to follow through on that. That could be anything from as simple as the time that we're going to be at somebody's house to provide care, to as complex as something as maybe somebody wants their loved one to come here from another state so that way they could say their goodbyes, and we're going to use every tool in our arsenal to make sure that that actually happens for them.
Now, you use that term, empower employees, and Clark, I'll turn to you. Let's dive in deeper, because this is one of those lessons learned for the companies out there who are watching this. How do you train and empower the employees?
Train is an interesting word, although I don't think that would really fit here. It's more of developing a culture.
Okay.
Caring for a family and an individual at this, end-of-life situation can bring situations that, promises are needed, sometimes really going the extra mile. When an employee has an idea about something they want to do that's extraordinary, that extra mile, and they come back and tell us about it, if they kind of get shut down, you've trained them not to do anything.
Exactly.
If they do that and they get praised for it, and even though those things may cost an extra time and money for the company, if they're praised for doing those extra things, you've created a culture of looking for the opportunity to do those extra things and honor those promises for those people.
Culture is what it's all about.
It's definitely a cultural thing.
We just have a few seconds. Do you have a specific story in mind about something, one of these times that has happened for you?
Mm-hmm. We had a difficult situation just recently where a patient was in their home. It was very important to them that they died in their home. And in this particular case, because of medical bills and different things that had happened to him, his house was in foreclosure. And one of the things that we were able to do, our employee said that they were going to do everything they could to make sure that this individual died in their home. And she went to the extra step of calling the mortgage company. We were able to get the house refinanced at no fees, and this individual and their family member were able to spend the last days in their home, which was not an easy thing to do.
That's going above and beyond.
Absolutely.
All right. Clark Lim, Honey Goodman, Treasure Valley Hospice, thanks so much for sharing that important information. Great lessons learned for our companies. We are talking about the best ways to do business right now on Twitter. Ask your question, hashtag BBBTrust. It's right there across the bottom of your screen. Now, you've seen honoring promises in action with the folks from Treasure Valley Hospice. What are some ways you can make sure employees are living up to expectations? Conversation with a business professor when we return. You are watching Business at its Best, presented by Ataraxis. You know, honoring promises starts with clear expectations, and it starts on the inside. As a manager or business owner, you have the responsibility to provide new employees with adequate knowledge and training so that they can perform their job. Dr. Marilyn Melchiorre with College of Idaho joins us today to talk about this. Thanks so much for being with us. Dr. Mel, as we like to call you. Yeah. So let's start out with this idea. What are some of the costs that are incurred when somebody doesn't start by clarifying expectations?
Right. And that's an important concept to understand, that the training really can cost money. I mean, not cost you money. People think it costs money, but it really can make you money. Because if the people are not properly trained, it can be low morale, then they don't perform, they're not as efficient, and if they lose some confidence in the job or the company, they may leave. So then you have turnover, more cost for the manager, and actually then training the people some more. So really every minute that an employee is performing below expectation can be lost revenue and lost opportunities.
Absolutely. So you've got some suggestions for improving new employee performance.
Yes.
Keeping the company profitable.
Yes, keeping profitable. And this is where being honest when you're interviewing and bringing someone on board, as far as what are the expectations, what are the job responsibilities, so you can share that with the employee or the prospective employee. But if you have an unusual job, maybe you need to do a job preview. Bring them in, let them do that task, and see if it is for them. That can help reduce turnover. If it has a certain skill base, you may want to test for that. So very important to be very honest and have a job description which allows you to have those expectations when you're communicating.
And you communicate that, set the level of clarity so that when promises are made, promises can be kept.
Right, and it's all clear on both sides from what the employer is expecting, and then share that with the person you're interviewing.
And we've talked about costs up to this point and value add. Any low-cost tips that you have for creating this orientation program?
Right. Yeah, ensuring that you do have a job description, that's key. And once you have a job description, that can be easily transferred over into like a checklist so that you ensure certain information and skills are covered with an orientation program. Many companies think and use a mentoring program. This also needs to have structure. It needs to have a checklist. Was this information covered with the new employee coming on? And after the employee's been with you for a while, there should be some follow-up. Don't just, let them go. Go back, find out, see if they have questions, if there's anything else that they might need.
Beyond just an annual review.
Beyond just an annual.
It needs to be constant, up to date.
A constant, yes, because as a new employee, you don't know what you don't know, and so you need to have that structure in providing the information so that they can be a contributing person to your organization.
Perfect. Great information for inside our organization. Dr. Marilyn Melchiorre, thank you so much for being with us today from College of Idaho. We are talking about honoring promises right now on Twitter. If you know a company that went above and beyond in keeping its word, share it with us. Hashtag BBBTrust. And coming up later, we visit with an Idaho Falls financial planner about how he works to follow through with clients. You are watching Business at its Best, presented by Ataraxis. Welcome back to Business at its Best. We're spending this half hour showing you the ways companies in Idaho honor promises. If you are a business owner, take note. If you're a customer, be watching for companies that act with this level of ethics and integrity. We turn to Northwest Nazarene University and Dr. Ron Galloway. He's the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs in charge of new site selection and a Professor of Leadership. Dr. Galloway, thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
So often we think about, honor promises, so we're going to go through the contract, and obviously we're going to do what the contract says, and sometimes you find businesses that don't live up to the contract. So as we talk about those things that are in writing as far as honoring promises, what are some of those sticking points, things we should be watching for?
Well, we should be watching to make sure that whatever is really important to the customer is fulfilled. If it's delivery time, if it's a quality, if it's a quantity, that we've done each of those things to the best of our ability and done them well.
So how do you create that level of that culture where you're thinking from the customer's perspective?
Well, I think you stop and you look from a leadership perspective at all the stakeholders. You would look at your employees, you would look at your suppliers, providers, and you look at your customers, and you would say, what is it that each of these needs from me as a leader, and how can I help make this part of the framework that happens in this enterprise, this business, or whatever the organization is. And then we take opportunities to set the proper examples for what should be done. And so something bad happens, and we have an opportunity for a learning moment. And we make it right, whether that be giving a prompt refund or apologizing and asking for forgiveness if something improper happened, or sending the right amount of product, or whatever it is, making sure that it's right and that it permeates from the very top down so that your employees can see that this is very important.
You're talking about leading by example.
Right.
And you briefly mentioned this idea that if something goes wrong, we're going to fix it, which is also important for the leader to step up to the plate and say, I made a mistake.
Right.
We didn't honor this promise, or we didn't follow through here, and be willing to take the knocks, show the example.
Right, show the example, and make sure that's something that we just do all the time. And then try to make sure that miscommunication doesn't happen again.
But that's tough.
That's very tough.
I mean, from a leadership perspective,
Sure.
That is a tough one to admit. We messed up on this one.
Well, it's always hard to apologize. The kicker, though, beyond that is to say, I'm sorry. And it's in the I'm sorry, please forgive me, that we begin to develop that trust to say, oh, you not only just said I'm sorry, which may be a flippant way of doing things, but please forgive me.
The action has to follow through afterwards, especially when we talk about this idea of honoring promises. And so it starts at the top, it begins with leadership, and I'm assuming there's got to be an accountability factor that follows through.
So there's some things that you can say, okay, let's make sure this doesn't happen again. So when you're looking at the dynamic of what happened in that breaking of the promise or whatever happened, go through and look at what each stage said that that each stage happened, and then you go back and you close the loop and you say, okay, how can I ensure that this doesn't happen again? And you then start with looking at the contract. Did we have the proper contract? Did we sign a contract? Was it verbal? If it was verbal, did I restate what the customer said that they wanted, or did the customer restate what I thought I was giving? So you start looking at the things that you did and making sure that doesn't happen again in the next go around.
Or if you overpromised, and that's a good time to reevaluate.
Sometimes you find that our cultures are a little bit different. We come from different backgrounds, and we think we can do something, and it wasn't what the other person expected, or they expected more from us. And there are a lot of examples of that in our daily lives, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. Dr. Ron Galloway, NNU, thank you so much for being with us. Excellent information. Tough topics to think about as we work through this process of honoring promises. And that's exactly what we are talking about right now on Twitter. Ask your question, #BBBTrust. And later on Business at its Best, honoring promises in the financial planning world. We're going to talk to one expert in Idaho Falls. You are watching Business at its Best, presented by Ataraxis. Welcome back. Ataraxis makes business at its best possible each week. The company takes care of the day-to-day work of HR, benefits, and payroll so a business owner can focus on growing business. Harrison's Hope is a client, and owner Jackie Johnson joins us to talk about honoring promise today. Jackie, thanks so much for being with us today. Harrison's Hope. And since you work with so many clients from a hospice perspective, tell me about, and also in so many different kinds of situations, how do you work to be sure that verbal promises are met and kept?
I actually like to have lots of people involved in verbal promises. In hospice, it's an interdisciplinary team, and there's quite a few people involved in every patient's care. So I think it's important that it's not just one team member making verbal promises, that hopefully it's an entire interdisciplinary team that is aware, and then we can attack it together. I think the more people involved, the better chance it has at not just being verbal, but actually being written and then being put into action. And in hospice, it's vital that you keep your promises.
Because you're talking about some intense situations at end of life, and when you think about a family gathered and you have the hospice caregiver there in the room with them, and things are said and somebody's going to hear something, so having that team approach.
Trust is everything, and they don't get to redo a death. So we work very, very hard in the beginning of each patient's care to establish trust, and trust is established by making sure that what you say you're going to do, you do. And
you mentioned about working toward that idea of having promises written down. So how do you handle that idea of written promises and being sure that those are kept?
Documentation. In medicine, documentation is everything, and our systems at Harrison's Hope are just ironclad. We document in a software system. Our clinicians have laptops at the bedside, and we have a policy that you document at the very moment that you are with that patient, because by the time you get to your car, you're going to forget what you discussed.
Points.
Not acceptable.
Yeah.
So it is document at bedside in the system, and the minute that you document, it is 100% accessible to the rest of the team, so that you just have a very small chance that anything and everything that is being said is not being passed on, and that's important.
And you mentioned software, and regardless of the industry that you're in, there is some great customer management software out there to help you keep track of what promises are made. 5
years ago, Harrison's Hope was on the cutting edge of going paperless. For a hospice in this area, we were one of the first, and gosh, it's almost been 6 years ago, and it's awesome.
So what kind of impact does this have on your business as a whole? When I say this, honoring promises, what's the impact overall on a business?
I don't think you can have a hospice if you can't keep your promises.
Or any business.
Any business, but oh my goodness, end of life, don't bother. It's the most important thing that we do every day. People are dying. They don't have time to worry about whether or not you're going to do what you say you're going to do. You just need to do it. Yeah.
Philosophy that every business needs to have, regardless
from the
of the
top
industry.
down.
Yeah,
from the top down.
Jackie Johnson, Harrison's Hope, thank you so much for being with us, sharing that information everybody can learn from.
Better Business Bureau has a number of resources to help your company be the best it can be. Check out our website, bbb.org, and also go to our Facebook page, search for BBB Snake River Region. We'd love it if you'd click that like button while you're at it. Also, we're talking about honoring promises right now on Twitter. Ask your question, #BBBTrust. And coming up next on Business at its Best, when your financial planner makes a promise to you, you expect follow through. How an Idaho Falls planner works to be sure he's honoring promises. When we return, you are watching Business at its Best, presented by Ataraxis. Welcome back to Business at its Best. You know, when someone is working to grow your money, honoring promises is extremely important. We took the Business at its Best camera to Cornerstone Financial, Idaho Falls, where we spoke with Matt Porter about honoring promises for his clients.
Yeah, it's definitely a mixed bag in our industry. There, you know, being in financial services, there's a lot of things that are out of your control, and so you really have to take care of things that are in your realm of influence. And so one of those things is, you know, customer service is very important to us, and honoring promises when it comes to contacts. You know, when are we going to be meeting with a client? What are we going to be doing? What is our commitment? We take it very seriously. It's something that we spend a lot of time with our staff talking about. It's something that's very important to us as management and owners that we take very seriously. But honoring promises it just has to be a true commitment to your client, to your customer.
Let's talk about how you work with staff to be sure promises are honored.
Taking notes and making sure that when someone is contacted, that we know when it happened, when's the next touch or contact going to be made. And so we have a system, you know, we have a client relationship management system that takes care of that for us. And so we know if staff X called client Y, then we know when that happened, what was spoken about, and then what's the next step. That's kind of how it goes with our staff, and we reinforce that at our staff meetings, at least once a month. So that it's a big important part of our practice.
So you have systems in place?
Absolutely. Yeah, we spend a lot of money actually every month. It's almost ridiculous how much it costs to have those systems, but it's one of the few ways that you can differentiate yourself in the marketplace is by having those systems, by having committed staff that will take care of that kind of stuff. It's not something that happens overnight, but I think consistent follow-up from us, from staff members, it builds the expectation that this company is for real. They are going to do what they say they do. It's easy to say it, but it does take months and years of actually following through on things before some people will say, they really have done a good job.
Well, before we leave you, here are a few tips and lessons learned from today's show that'll help you honor promises. It's really simple, but you must be proactive. If you put something in writing, be sure you live up to the agreement. If you tell someone you're going to do something, do it. And then be clear about what you're going to do so everyone involved knows what to expect. And as you heard Dr. Ron Galloway say, lead by example in honoring promises. Well, we thank you so much for being with us for the past half hour right here. We will be back next week, and we tackle the tough topic of integrity. What does it mean, and how can it permeate your business from top to bottom? We're going to show you some companies in Idaho that are doing it well and have received a lot of recognition for acting with integrity.